The most shocking reality hitting China's marriage market right now is this: millions of Chinese men, long priced out of marrying local women due to sky high demands for houses, cars, and massive bride prices, are now finding willing partners in Russian women who arrive with zero such requirements and instead bring genuine partnership, family values, and even parental support in the form of generous gifts. This shift is not just a passing trend, but a direct consequence of decades of distorted expectations that have left countless Chinese women facing a stark new winter in their search for husbands, as the men they once overlooked turn elsewhere for relationships built on mutual respect rather than material checklists. Stay until the end to understand exactly how this dynamic unfolded, why it exposes deeper flaws in modern relationship economics, and what it truly means for the future of love, family, and society in one of the world's largest nations, because the full picture reveals consequences that go far beyond individual choices and point to systemic changes no one saw coming. Now, let us dive deeply into this evolving situation that has captured so much attention across social platforms and everyday conversations in China. For years, the narrative around marriage in China has centered on well known pressures stemming from demographic realities and cultural traditions. The legacy of policies that shaped family sizes, combined with a strong historical preference for sons, created a significant imbalance where there are tens of millions more men than women in the marriageable age groups. This surplus of men naturally intensified competition and drove up the costs associated with forming a union. Families of daughters began expecting substantial contributions from prospective grooms, including property ownership, outright purchases of homes or apartments, in many cases, expensive vehicles, and traditional bride prices that, in some regions, reach hundreds of thousands of yuan, often accompanied by gold jewelry or other valuables. These expectations became normalized in urban and rural areas alike, turning what should be a union based on affection and shared life goals into something resembling a high stakes financial transaction. Men, especially those from modest backgrounds or working regular jobs, found themselves unable to meet these thresholds, no matter how hard they worked or how responsible they proved themselves to be. Over time, many of these men simply stepped back from the pursuit altogether, focusing instead on their career's personal stability and individual pursuits, finding a measure of peace and solitude rather than constant pressure to perform economically for someone else's approval. Into this environment stepped a growing number of women from Russia and neighboring former Soviet regions, including Ukraine and Belarus, who began exploring opportunities in China not out of desperation, but through a combination of a genuine interest, cultural openness, and practical recognition of compatibility. And these women often arrive with advanced educations, holding degrees at the master's or even doctoral level, speaking multiple languages, and bringing professional skills that allow them to contribute meaningfully, whether in cities or even in more rural settings. What stands out immediately in reports from matchmaking parks and online discussions is their approach to marriage, which contrasts sharply with the prevailing local standards. They do not demand bride prices, houses, or cars as prerequisites. Instead, they emphasize qualities like reliability, family orientation, filial respect toward our elders, and a willingness to share responsibilities in daily life, including housework and child rearing. Many express admiration for Chinese men's dedication to providing stability and their lower tendencies toward certain negative habits seen elsewhere. Parents of these women sometimes go further, sending substantial gifts or support to the prospective Chinese groom and his family as a gesture of goodwill and investment in the union, recognizing the value of a hardworking partner who prioritizes family. This reciprocity creates an atmosphere of mutual appreciation rather than one sided obligation. Consider the scenes that have become almost iconic in recent years at places like the famous matchmaking corners in major cities such as Shanghai's People's Park or similar spots in other urban centers. Parents traditionally gather there holding signs detailing their children's qualifications, education, income age, and sometimes photos in hopes of attracting suitable matches. In the past, these gatherings featured mostly mothers advocating for their sons or daughters with high expectations. Now, observers note an increasing presence of foreign women, often blonde with striking features, standing alongside or even taking prominent positions, holding straightforward signs that read simply, "No bride price, only seeking Chinese men," or variations expressing openness to relocation and family life. These women present themselves as ready to integrate, adapting to local customs, learning the language where needed, and committing to building a home together. For the parents of Chinese bachelors, especially those whose sons earn average salaries perhaps around 10,000 yuan per month or less, the appeal becomes immediately clear. A foreign partner who brings no financial drain on the family resources, who may even contribute through her own earnings or dowry like support, represents a viable path to grandchildren and family continuity without bankrupting the household. Stories circulate of families exchanging photos excitedly in group chats, overwhelmed with relief at the prospect of a harmonious match rather than endless negotiations over assets. This development has not gone unnoticed or unchallenged by Chinese women, particularly those who remain single into their late 20s, 30s, or beyond, often labeled in societal terms as leftover in ways that carry heavy stigma, despite their achievements in education and careers. Social media platforms have lit up with reactions ranging from frustration to outright anger as videos and posts document these matchmaking encounters. Some express outrage at the idea that foreign women are somehow undercutting local standards or taking advantage of men who they claim should be striving harder to meet traditional expectations. Others mock the choices, suggesting that men opting for these partnerships are settling or unable to compete in what they see as the proper hierarchy of desirability. Yet, beneath the surface commentary lies a growing anxiety rooted in the realization that the old rules no longer guarantee outcomes. For decades, many women absorbed messages from media influencers and cultural narratives promoting independent self worth tied to material treatment and the idea that true love means being pampered, protected from hardship, and never compromising on lifestyle standards. Phrases encouraging women to live exquisitely, to demand proof of love through spending, and to avoid becoming overburdened with domestic duties became widespread, reinforced by consumerism that equated happiness with luxury goods, cosmetics, fashion, and status symbols far beyond basic needs. The result was a progressive shift where expectations escalated while reciprocity in relationships diminished in many cases. Men faced constant pressure to provide extravagantly while being told that contributing emotionally or sharing chores was insufficient if the financial baseline was not met. Over time, this created resentment on both sides. Men who once pursued relationships diligently began to withdraw, investing in themselves, pursuing hobbies, travel, personal growth, or simply enjoying single life without the drain of endless dating expenses that yielded little return. The so called simp economy, where men competed to outspend one another to win favor, collapsed under its own weight as more recognized that genuine connection could not be bought indefinitely, and that peace and solitude often outweighed the stress of pursuit. Meanwhile, economic realities tightened with rising costs of living, housing, food, and childcare, making dual income households essential, yet the narrative persisted that women should not have to sacrifice comfort or career for family. This contradiction left many women in a difficult position when the men they expected to chase them instead chose other paths or other partners entirely. Russian women entering this space highlight the contrast vividly. They often describe Chinese men as respectful, hardworking, and committed to family in ways that align with their own values shaped by different cultural experiences. In interviews and shared stories, women who have married Chinese husbands emphasize small but meaningful details, mutual support during challenges, open communication, respect for differences, and a shared focus on building a life together rather than accumulating status symbols. One woman who has lived in China for over a decade and built a family there explains that cultural gaps are overstated because fundamentals like cherishing family, overcoming daily hurdles, and communicating honestly transcend borders. Another points out that happiness stems not from nationality, but from genuine care, shown in actions like supporting a partner through pregnancy or dividing responsibilities without complaint. These accounts resonate with men tired of feeling like walking ATMs and offer a model where value flows both ways. The broader implications extend beyond individual matches to the health of society itself. Marriage rates in China have declined sharply for consecutive years, reaching historic lows, with registrations dropping significantly from previous peaks. Birth numbers follow suit, trending downward and intensifying concerns about population aging, workforce sustainability, and long term economic vitality. When young people delay or forego marriage altogether, the ripple effects touch everything from housing markets to education systems to elder care. The influx of foreign partners, while small in overall numbers, serves as a mirror reflecting unresolved tensions in gender expectations, economic pressures, and the influence of consumerism on human connections. It prompts difficult questions about whether desires for luxury and one sided provision are innate or manufactured by decades of targeted marketing that objectifies relationships, turning love into a commodity where one party must perpetually prove worth through spending. Critics of the trend argue that it exposes a sickness in the domestic market where materialism has overtaken emotion and where both men and women suffer from rigid roles that no longer serve anyone. Defenders of traditional standards insist that foreign women fail to grasp the full realities of life in China, including long term financial responsibilities and societal pressures. Yet the debates themselves reveal a contest of values, one side clinging to evolved expectations of provision and status, the other seeking simpler mutual support and partnership. Foreign brides do not inherently outcompete local women in every way, but they do offer an alternative that sidesteps the financial barriers that have paralyzed so many potential unions. This forces a reckoning with whether those barriers serve love or merely perpetuate inequality and isolation. As this pattern continues, the consequences become clearer. Chinese women who once held leverage through scarcity now face a market where options narrow, not because of any inherent flaw, but because the terms they inherited no longer attract the partners they seek. Men who walked away in search of peace find it in relationships that reward character over wallet size. The result is a rebalancing not through force, but through choice, where those willing to adapt thrive, while those who refuse confront a colder reality. Winter has indeed arrived for many in the sense that old assumptions no longer hold and adaptation becomes necessary for anyone hoping to build meaningful connections in this changing landscape. To truly grasp why this shift feels so seismic in China's social landscape, we need to step back and examine the historical currents that shaped the current marriage market long before any Russian woman ever boarded a flight to Beijing or Harbin. The one child policy implemented from the late 1970s through most of the 2000s although relaxed in stages until fully phased out by 2015, created a demographic architecture that tilted heavily toward males. Official statistics from the National Census Bureaus over the decades show birth sex ratios climbing as high as 118 boys for every 100 girls in peak years, driven by widespread cultural son preference combined with selective practices that were difficult to regulate at scale. Even after policy adjustments, the echo effects persist, producing cohorts where men outnumber women by tens of millions in the prime marriage ages of roughly 20 to 40. This structural surplus turned marriage into a seller's market for women and their families, particularly in urbanizing regions where economic growth amplified expectations rather than moderating them. Parents who had invested heavily in educating their daughters and positioning them for success viewed marriage not merely as a personal milestone, but as the final transaction that would secure lifelong financial security and social status for the entire family line. The bride price tradition, rooted in centuries of rural custom, evolved in modern times into a formalized demand, often explicitly negotiated through intermediaries or directly between families. And it ballooned in tandem with rising property values and consumer aspirations. In provinces like Jiangxi, Henan, or Shandong, bride prices routinely exceed 200,000 yuan, sometimes climbing toward half a million or more in competitive areas, pushing many working class families into debt or forcing sons to delay marriage indefinitely. Parallel to this economic escalation came a profound cultural transformation, accelerated by rapid urbanization, media saturation, and the arrival of globalized ideas about gender roles and personal fulfillment. Young women entering adulthood in the 2000s and 2010s absorbed messages from television dramas, social media influencers, and advertising campaigns that portrayed the ideal modern woman as independent, glamorous, high value, and deserving of extraordinary treatment from any man fortunate enough to win her attention. Luxury brands, cosmetics, fashion houses, and lifestyle influencers promoted the notion that self worth correlates directly with the level of material provision a partner provides, from designer handbags to overseas vacations to outright ownership of assets transferred in her name before marriage even begins. This messaging dovetailed with feminist leaning discourses adapted to the Chinese context that emphasized escaping traditional domestic burdens, rejecting men who could not elevate a woman's lifestyle, and prioritizing career, personal freedom, and aesthetic pursuits over early family formation. The phrase exquisite living became a mantra repeated across platforms, encouraging women to demand proof of love through spending to avoid settling and to treat relationships as marketplaces where they held the higher bargaining power. Men, in turn, encountered a parallel set of pressures from their own families and peers to prove manhood through provision to acquire the house, the car, the cash gifts, and the status symbols necessary to even enter the conversation. The combination created a feedback loop where expectations on both sides hardened into non negotiable checklists, leaving little room for compromise, affection, or shared struggle. By the mid 2010s, cracks in the system had become impossible to ignore. Marriage registration numbers, which once hovered around 10 to 13 million annually, began a steady decline, falling below 10 million by 2018 and continuing downward, reaching roughly 6 to 7 million in recent years, according to Ministry of Civil Affairs data. Young people cited high costs, housing unaffordability, work pressure, and mismatched expectations as primary reasons for delaying or abandoning the institution altogether. For men, especially those earning median urban salaries of perhaps 8 to 15,000 yuan monthly, the math simply did not work. Saving for a down payment on an apartment in a tier 1 or tier 2 city could consume an entire decade of income, even with parental help, while simultaneously covering bride price demands left no margin for error. Many concluded that the pursuit offered diminishing returns, particularly when dating itself had become expensive, with men expected to cover meals, entertainment, travel, and gifts while receiving increasingly conditional interest in return. A growing number turned inward, investing in self improvement gym routines, skill acquisition side businesses, travel, or simply enjoying the freedoms of single life without constant financial hemorrhage. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Online communities dedicated to male self preservation and detachment from traditional courtship pressures expanded rapidly, sharing stories of men who walked away, found contentment, and never looked back. This collective withdrawal, what some commentators have labeled the simp economy collapse, represented not laziness or entitlement, but a rational response to a market that had priced most participants out. It was precisely into this vacuum of disengaged local bachelors that women from Russia and other Slavic countries began stepping with increasing visibility and success. Unlike the earlier waves of cross border marriages that often involve Southeast Asian women from Vietnam, Cambodia, or Myanmar who entered through established brokerage channels and sometimes faced exploitation concerns, the Russian influx appears more organic, driven by personal initiative language study programs, tourism, cultural exchanges, and direct use of international dating platforms tailored to East Asian men. Many of these women arrive already possessing strong educational credentials, often holding bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees in fields ranging from linguistics education engineering to business administration. They speak English fluently, frequently study Mandarin intensively upon arrival, and demonstrate adaptability to Chinese customs, including respect for elders, participation in family rituals, and willingness to live in smaller cities or rural areas where housing costs remain manageable. What distinguishes their approach most starkly is the absence of material preconditions. Reports from matchmaking events, online forums, and even state media coverage describe women explicitly stating no demands for property, no insistence on bride price, and in some cases, families back home sending monetary gifts, jewelry, or household goods as a dowry like contribution to signal goodwill and investment in the match. This reversal of the traditional flow of resources from groom to bride family flips the script entirely, creating immediate appeal for Chinese men and their parents who have spent years fearing bankruptcy from marriage negotiations. One recurring theme in accounts from couples who have formed through this route is the emphasis on practical partnership over performative romance. Russian women frequently describe Chinese husbands as dependable, consistent providers who prioritize family stability and show respect without needing constant validation through luxury purchases. In return, they offer emotional warmth, physical fitness, cooperative attitudes toward housework and child rearing, and a cultural background that values long term commitment over fleeting excitement. These qualities resonate deeply with men exhausted by years of feeling evaluated solely on earning potential. Stories shared in viral videos and discussion threads highlight everyday moments that build trust. A husband helping with cooking during pregnancy, a wife learning to prepare regional Chinese dishes, a couple navigating language barriers together with patients or families exchanging warm gestures across borders. Such narratives stand in contrast to the transactional tone that dominates many local matchmaking discussions, where conversations rarely move beyond assetless income verification and hukou status. The visibility of these successful unions has amplified reactions among single Chinese women, particularly those in urban professional circles who find themselves increasingly sidelined in the very market they once dominated. Social media threads explode with commentary, some expressing bewilderment that men would choose partners perceived as less sophisticated or culturally distant, others voicing resentment toward women seen as undercutting established norms by offering themselves without the expected financial barriers. Certain voices accuse foreign women of strategic opportunism, suggesting they target Chinese men for citizenship stability or economic advantages while ignoring the long term challenges of integration. Yet, these criticisms often overlook the mirror they hold up to domestic dynamics. When women openly state preferences for partners earning several times did the national average, owning property outright and willing to fund an elevated lifestyle while contributing minimally to household labor, the predictable outcome is disengagement from precisely those men who cannot or will not meet the bar. The arrival of partners who prioritize compatibility, character, and mutual effort exposes the contingency of those preferences not as natural rights, but as products of a specific historical and economic moment that may no longer hold. This exposure generates discomfort because it forces confrontation with consequences that were once abstract. Women who internalized the message that holding out for maximum provision would eventually yield the desired outcome now face a shrinking pool of willing suitors as men either opt for solitude or pursue alternatives that bypass the gauntlet of demands. The so called leftover women phenomenon, which once referred primarily to career focused urbanites in their late 20s and 30s, has expanded demographically, encompassing broader age groups and socioeconomic strata. Parents who once confidently held signs advertising highly educated, beautiful daughters with stable jobs now stand for hours with dwindling interest as passersby gravitate toward foreign women whose signs emphasize openness, flexibility, and family values over asset requirements. The psychological toll manifests in online venting sessions where frustration mixes with anxiety about aging out of fertility windows, declining social status, and the prospect of lifelong singlehood in a society that still ties worth heavily to marital and parental roles. Meanwhile, the state watches these developments with mixed interest. Official rhetoric continues to promote marriage and higher birth rates as national priorities, issuing guidelines encouraging earlier unions, reducing extravagant wedding customs, and even offering subsidies in some localities for young couples. Yet, policy levers struggle against entrenched cultural and economic realities. Attempts to cap bride prices or discourage materialism encounter resistance from families who view such demands as legitimate protection for daughters in a patriarchal system that historically left women vulnerable after marriage. At the same time, the government has cautiously welcomed certain forms of international marriage, particularly when they align with soft power goals or demographic stabilization. Visa policies remain relatively open for spouses of Chinese citizens, and integration programs in some provinces support foreign wives learning language and customs. The irony is palpable. A nation that spent decades engineering population control now grapples with undermarriage and underbirth, while a modest stream of foreign women helps alleviate the bachelor surplus in targeted locales. Looking deeper, The trend illuminates broader questions about the intersection of globalization, consumerism, and human relationships in rapidly modernizing societies. China compressed a century of social change into 3 decades, moving from agrarian traditions to hyper urbanized consumer capitalism at unprecedented speed. The result fused traditional expectations of male provision with modern individualism and materialism, creating a hybrid that proved unstable. When women embraced independence without fully dismantling the cultural script that men must provide extravagantly, and when men internalized the message that love equates to spending without questioning the sustainability, the system became brittle. The entry of women from cultures where partnership retains stronger elements of reciprocity exposes that brittleness not through superiority, but through contrast. Russian women do not arrive as flawless alternatives. They face their own challenges, including homesickness, cultural misunderstandings, family separation, and occasional prejudice. Yet their willingness to meet men halfway without preconditioning affection on wealth disrupts the local equilibrium. This disruption carries lessons that extend beyond China. Similar patterns appear in other high pressure marriage markets across East Asia, where economic growth outpaced cultural adaptation, producing gender imbalances or expectation mismatches. In South Korea, Japan, and parts of Southeast Asia, young men and women increasingly delay or avoid marriage, citing costs, incompatibility, and shifting priorities. Cross border unions fill some gaps, yet spark parallel debates about authenticity, integration, and national identity. What unites these cases is the recognition that relationships cannot indefinitely sustain one sided extraction, whether financial, emotional, or domestic, without generating backlash, withdrawal, or redirection of energy elsewhere. When one group consistently demands more than it offers, the other eventually seeks balance through exit or alternative sources of connection. In the Chinese context, this redirection manifests vividly in the growing acceptance of foreign partners, particularly from Slavic countries whose cultural proximity in terms of family emphasis and gender complementarity makes integration smoother than in some other pairings. As more stories circulate of happy families, bilingual children, stable households, and satisfied elders, the trend gains momentum not through coercion, but through demonstration of viable alternatives. Men who once believed marriage required near impossible financial feats discover that partnership can mean shared effort, mutual growth, and emotional security rather than perpetual auditioning. Women who observe these outcomes confront the uncomfortable possibility that the standards they inherited may have priced them out of the very connections they desire. Adaptation becomes inevitable either by recalibrating expectations downward, embracing compromise, or accepting singlehood as a deliberate choice rather than a forced outcome. The pace of change accelerates because technology and connectivity lower barriers to cross cultural exploration. Dating applications, translation tools, video calls, and affordable travel allow individuals to bypass traditional gatekeepers, parents, matchmakers, community scrutiny, and meet directly on terms they negotiate themselves. A woman in Novosibirsk can learn about Chinese culture through short form videos, connect with men in Zhengzhou or Chengdu, exchange months of conversation, and eventually visit with low risk compared to past eras. Similarly, a Chinese bachelor in a second tier city can access profiles of educated women abroad who express interest without the local pressure of dowry negotiations. This democratization of courtship erodes monopolies on desirability once held by those who controlled the highest status assets or beauty standards, shifting power toward those who offer authenticity, compatibility, and willingness to build together. As these shifts solidify, the marriage market in China moves toward greater pluralism. No longer does a single model of provision and status dominate. Instead, multiple paths emerge, traditional high demand unions persisting among the wealthy, international pairings gaining traction among average earners, deliberate singlehood or cohabitation without formal registration expanding among the young. Each path carries trade offs, yet the overall effect dilutes the leverage once concentrated in one direction. Chinese women who wish to marry must increasingly compete not only on traditional metrics of education, appearance, and family background, but on qualities of warmth, cooperation, flexibility, and genuine partnership qualities that foreign women have highlighted by default through their different starting assumptions. This competition need not be zero sum. It can elevate standards across the board, encouraging everyone to bring more to the table emotionally, practically, and relationally. Yet it undeniably ends the era when unilateral demands went largely unchallenged. The deeper tragedy, if one chooses to frame it that way, lies not in any group's victory or defeat, but in the years lost to misalignment. Countless men spent their 20s and 30s grinding under pressure that yielded little fulfillment, while many women invested in lifestyles and careers, assuming provision would follow, only to discover the market had changed beneath their feet. Both sides paid heavy costs in delayed families, foregone intimacy, and emotional isolation before alternatives emerged. The lesson embedded in these developments is stark expectations, divorced from reciprocity, eventually collapse under their own weight. When love becomes a ledger of debits and credits rather than a shared endeavor, it loses its binding power. Russian women entering the picture did not create this reality. They simply revealed it by offering a counter model that works because it rests on mutual value rather than extraction. None of this suggests that local relationships cannot thrive or that cultural differences disappear overnight. Successful Chinese unions continue every day, built on communication, compromise, and shared vision. Yet the presence of viable alternatives forces everyone to question inherited scripts and adapt accordingly. Men who once felt disposable, unless they could pay the price, reclaim agency by choosing partners who see their worth beyond bank accounts. Women who recognize the shifting terrain may choose to emphasize strengths that endure longer than youth or material leverage, kindness, loyalty, resilience, shared goals, and the capacity to build a home rather than merely inhabit one purchased by someone else. Families on both sides learn that grandchildren arrive through connection, not transaction. Society as a whole gains from reduced pressure on individuals to conform to unsustainable norms, allowing energy, once consumed by courtship competition, to flow toward innovation, productivity, and personal meaning. The unfolding story remains dynamic, with new chapters written monthly. As more couples form, more children are born into mixed households, and more conversations unfold online and offline about what relationships should mean in the 21st century. The shock of foreign women integrating successfully into Chinese families serves as both catalyst and symptom of a broader rebalancing, one that challenges materialism, reasserts reciprocity, and reminds everyone that human connection ultimately depends on what people are willing to give rather than what they insist on receiving. Winter for outdated expectations has indeed arrived, yet spring follows for those adaptable enough to embrace new possibilities. Building on the realization that globalization and technology have democratized access to potential partners, we must now examine how specific policy changes, economic incentives, and shifting perceptions of value continue to reshape who enters marriages and why in contemporary China. Recent adjustments to visa regulations between China and Russia, for instance, have eased travel, making it simpler for individuals to meet face to face, explore compatibility, and pursue long term commitments without the prohibitive barriers of past decades. These facilitations align with broader diplomatic warming that emphasizes people to people exchanges, yet they also inadvertently accelerate personal level migrations driven by individual calculations of opportunity and stability. In rural provinces where traditional bride price customs remain entrenched, despite official discouragement, the contrast becomes even more pronounced. Local men often face compounded pressures from land inheritance patterns, limited job prospects outside agriculture, and families expecting them to uphold generational continuity through marriage and offspring. When these men encounter women from abroad who express readiness to relocate, contribute to farm work or small businesses, and integrate into extended family structures without imposing additional financial burdens, the appeal proves compelling. Such pairings frequently result in households where roles blend traditional expectations with modern practicality, the foreign wife learning regional dialects, participating in seasonal labor, and raising children bilingual in Mandarin and her native tongue. This practical integration challenges stereotypes that portray cross border unions as inherently unstable or opportunistic. Instead, many endure because they rest on foundations of shared labor, mutual reliance, and gradual cultural fusion rather than romanticized ideals alone. Reports from border regions and inland villages describe families where Russian or Ukrainian mothers teach children folk songs alongside Chinese classics, while fathers maintain steady employment in local industries or entrepreneurship. These stories circulate through community networks, reinforcing the viability of such matches and encouraging more men to consider similar paths. The demographic math supports this momentum, with projections indicating persistent surpluses of marriageable men in certain cohorts, even as overall population trends shift. Although national marriage registrations showed a modest rebound in parts of 2025 following policy simplifications, like allowing registrations anywhere in the country rather than restricting them to huku locations, the underlying pressures persist. Birth figures continued their downward trajectory, reaching historic lows, underscoring that formal unions alone do not guarantee higher fertility when economic uncertainty, career demands, and revised life priorities weigh heavily. Economic uncertainty plays a pivotal role in sustaining the appeal of low demand partnerships. Young Chinese men, particularly those in mid tier cities or countryside areas, grapple with stagnant wages relative to rising living expenses, youth, unemployment spikes in some sectors, and the lingering shadow of property market volatility. In this environment, the prospect of a partner who arrives without expectations of immediate asset transfers or luxury provisioning feels liberating. It allows focus on building incrementally through joint effort rather than starting from a deficit created by upfront costs. Women from Russia often bring transferable skills, professional qualifications, or entrepreneurial mindsets that enable them to generate income, contribute to household finances, or even start small ventures catering to niche markets like imported goods, language tutoring, or cultural experiences. This economic reciprocity stands in stark opposition to narratives that once dominated domestic dating, where provision flowed predominantly one way and emotional labor was undervalued unless accompanied by material proof. Social perceptions evolve alongside these practical realities. Online discussions increasingly feature voices acknowledging that traditional gender scripts have become maladaptive in a high cost, low trust dating environment. Men share experiences of exhaustion from repeated cycles of investment in appearances, gifts, and entertainment only to encounter conditional interest or abrupt withdrawals when financial ceilings became apparent. Women who reflect honestly admit internalizing messages that equated empowerment with never compromising on standards, yet discovering solitude or serial short term connections as unintended outcomes. The entry of foreign women serves as a catalyst for these reflections, prompting questions about whether demands for extravagance stem from genuine needs or from amplified consumerism that profits corporations far more than individuals. When luxury becomes the baseline for desirability, relationships transform into status competitions rather than collaborative endeavors. The alternative model presented by many Slavic women, one emphasizing cooperation, respect for effort, and enjoyment of simple shared life, disrupts this cycle, offering evidence that contentment can derive from less rather than more. Critically, the phenomenon also highlights regional variations within China itself. In wealthier coastal provinces where education levels and incomes run higher, local women maintain stronger leverage through professional networks and urban advantages. There, the influx of foreign partners remains minimal, and debates center more on cultural compatibility than economic relief. In contrast, inland and northeastern areas where industrial restructuring left pockets of underemployment, the shift proves more noticeable. Matchmaking services in these locales report increased inquiries from men seeking introductions to Russian speakers or those open to relocation. Some agencies specialize in facilitating connections through language exchanges, cultural events, or direct travel arrangements, capitalizing on eased border policies. Success rates vary, yet positive testimonials spread virally, fueling further interest. Parents who once despaired over sons remaining unmarried now express cautious optimism, viewing foreign daughters in law as pathways to grandchildren, family harmony, and elder care support in aging societies. This optimism, however, coexists with legitimate concerns about integration challenges. Language barriers, initial homesickness differences in child rearing philosophies, and occasional prejudice from extended families or communities can strain even well intentioned unions. Successful cases often involve proactive efforts from both sides, such as joint language classes, participation in local festivals, and open dialogues about expectations. Women who thrive demonstrate resilience, adaptability, and genuine affection for their adopted homes, while men provide emotional security and practical assistance in navigating bureaucracy or employment. When these elements align, the unions not only endure, but contribute positively to local demographics by producing children who bridge cultures and strengthen community ties. From a societal standpoint, the trend underscores the limits of top down interventions in intimate spheres. Government campaigns promoting marriage through subsidies, collective weddings, or campaigns against extravagant bride prices achieve partial success, yet fail to address root causes embedded in cultural conditioning, economic inequality, and media driven aspirations. Policies that simplify registration or offer housing incentives for young families help marginally, yet cannot override personal calculations of risk and reward. The rebound in registrations during portions of 2025 illustrates responsiveness to facilitation, but sustained increases require deeper cultural recalibration toward reciprocity and realism. When individuals perceive marriage as a mutual enhancement rather than a high stakes transaction, participation rises organically. Comparisons to neighboring countries reveal parallel dynamics tempered by unique contexts. In South Korea, intense competition in education and employment delays marriage, while rising costs deter family formation, leading to some cross border pairings, though less prominently with Slavic women. Japan faces similar aging and low fertility challenges with cultural emphasis on harmony, sometimes clashing with modern individualism. Southeast Asian nations experience outbound marriage migration for economic reasons, contrasting China's inbound pattern driven by internal imbalances. Across these cases, a common thread emerges: unsustainable expectations, whether financial, cultural, or emotional, eventually prompt redirection toward alternatives that restore balance. In China, the specific combination of demographic legacy, high materialism, and geopolitical proximity to Russia creates a distinctive manifestation where foreign women fill perceived voids left by domestic disengagement. Looking forward, the trajectory depends on how both men and women respond to this mirror held up by cross cultural pairings. If more local women recognize the advantages of flexibility, cooperation, and emotional availability over rigid checklists, the market could rebalance internally, fostering healthier dynamics. Men might rediscover value in pursuing connections grounded in shared growth rather than perpetual proving. Families could shift from viewing marriage as asset consolidation to seeing it as alliance building for mutual flourishing. The presence of foreign partners need not threaten local women, but instead invite reflection on what truly sustains relationships amid rapid change. Those who adapt by emphasizing enduring qualities, kindness, reliability, shared purpose, stand to thrive in an environment where options multiply and old monopolies erode. Ultimately, this chapter in China's social evolution illustrates that human connections resist rigid engineering, whether by policy, tradition, or commerce. When systems become extractive, people seek equilibrium through whatever channels remain open. Russian women entering the scene did not engineer. The crisis, they exposed its contours by demonstrating that partnership flourishes when value exchanges bidirectionally. The fury from some quarters reflects discomfort with that exposure, yet discomfort often precedes necessary adjustment. As more stories accumulate of stable, happy families formed across borders, the narrative shifts from invasion to illustration of possibility. Men find affirmation that character and effort suffice. Women confront the contingency of elevated standards, and society gains diverse models for building futures amid uncertainty. The modest uptick in marriage registrations during the first 9 months of 2025, reaching an 8.5% increase over the same period the previous year. According to Ministry of Civil Affairs, figures offers a momentary counterpoint to the prolonged downward spiral that has defined demographic trends in China for over a decade. This rebound appears linked to several converging factors, including the implementation of nationwide registration policies that allow couples to formalize unions anywhere in the country, rather than being confined to their household registration locations, easing logistical hurdles for mobile young professionals. Favorable zodiac alignments in 2025, considered auspicious for weddings in traditional beliefs, prompted many who had postponed ceremonies during less propitious years to proceed finally. Vendors in major bridal markets report heightened activity with orders for dresses, accessories, and photography services climbing noticeably in urban centers like Shanghai and Shenzhen, where surges approach 30 to 40% in some locales compared to recent lows. While encouraging on the surface, these gains remain fragile against the backdrop of persistent structural challenges that continue to suppress overall family formation. Birth numbers dipped to around 7.92 million in 2025, marking yet another record low and reflecting that even when marriages rise, the decision to have children faces separate, formidable barriers, including soaring childcare expenses, competitive job markets, extended working hours, and widespread uncertainty about future economic stability. Within this fluctuating landscape, the role of cross border unions, particularly those involving women from Russia and other post Soviet states, assumes greater significance as a niche but symbolically potent response to domestic mismatches. Although precise nationwide statistics on Sino Russian marriages remain limited and often aggregated under broader international categories, customs and border data from regions like Manjuli and Heihe indicate a sustained 30% plus increase in registrations over the past 5 years, interrupted only briefly by pandemic restrictions. These figures, while modest in absolute terms relative to China's total population, highlight a targeted flow where men from less affluent inland provinces or rural backgrounds find partners who bypass entrenched local prerequisites. Visa policy adjustments, including a trial visa free entry for ordinary Russian passport holders from mid 2025 through mid 2026, further lower entry barriers, facilitating initial meetings, extended visits, and eventual family formation. Russian officials themselves have publicly anticipated a corresponding surge in such partnerships, citing China's enduring gender imbalance as a natural driver for men seeking compatible spouses abroad. This official acknowledgement underscores how geopolitical proximity and eased mobility intersect with personal aspirations to create new pathways for connection. The appeal extends beyond mere convenience to encompass perceived alignments in values and lifestyle expectations. Many Chinese men describe Russian women as embodying a blend of traditional femininity and practical resilience qualities they feel have become rarer in urban domestic dating scenes, shaped by intense competition and material emphasis. In return, these women frequently cite Chinese men's reputation for diligence, family devotion, and avoidance of certain social vices prevalent in some other contexts as attractive counterpoints to experiences back home. Border cities have emerged as natural hubs for these encounters, with markets, cafes, and social events serving as organic meeting points where language exchanges evolve into deeper relationships. Couples often navigate initial cultural adjustments through mutual learning, one partner mastering basic Mandarin phrases while the other adopts elements of Russian cuisine or holiday traditions into daily routines. Children born into these families grow up navigating dual linguistic and cultural worlds, enriching community diversity in otherwise homogeneous settings. Reactions within China to this development reveal layers of complexity beyond surface level frustration. While some online commentary from women expresses indignation at the notion of foreign entrants disrupting established norms, others engage in more introspective analysis, questioning how domestic standards evolved to the point where viable partners seek alternatives. Influencers and commentators occasionally point out that the zero bride price stance adopted by many Russian women does not equate to undervaluation, but rather to a different framework for assessing worth, one centered on character compatibility and long term partnership potential rather than immediate asset accumulation. This perspective invites broader reflection on whether the prevailing emphasis on financial proof of commitment has inadvertently narrowed the pool of acceptable suitors, leaving many men feeling perpetually inadequate and prompting withdrawal or redirection. The visibility of successful Sino Russian families, shared through short videos, testimonials, and community anecdotes, challenges monolithic views of desirability, prompting some to reconsider priorities toward qualities that sustain relationships through life's inevitable hardships. Economic considerations remain central to understanding why these unions gain traction in specific segments. In areas affected by industrial slowdowns or agricultural modernization, Men often earn stable but modest incomes insufficient to compete in high pressure urban marriage markets, yet adequate to support a family when paired with a partner willing to contribute economically and domestically. Russian women, many equipped with higher education or vocational training, frequently secure employment in education, tourism, translation, or small scale business enhancing household resilience. This dual earner model contrasts with patterns where one spouse shoulders disproportionate financial responsibility, allowing greater flexibility in lifestyle choices, including relocation to more affordable regions or investment in children's futures. The absence of dowry like demands reduces upfront stress, enabling couples to focus resources on shared goals such as home improvements, education, or travel rather than servicing debt from wedding negotiations. Media portrayals amplify both the allure and the controversy surrounding these matches. Short form content platforms feature clips of bilingual couples celebrating milestones, bilingual children performing cultural dances, or families blending holiday traditions, generating viral appeal among viewers seeking positive narratives amid widespread pessimism about romance. At the same time, critical voices highlight potential downsides, including integration difficulties, power imbalances in migration dynamics, or exaggerated idealization that overlooks everyday frictions. Balanced accounts emphasize that successful cases involve ongoing effort, communication, and compromise from all parties rather than effortless harmony. Women who thrive in these contexts often credit supportive husbands, community acceptance, and personal adaptability, while acknowledging occasional isolation from extended family networks back home. The phenomenon also prompts examination of evolving gender dynamics in a globalized era. As women worldwide gain greater autonomy through education, career opportunities, and financial independence, traditional scripts assigning men sole provider roles face increasing strain. In China, this tension manifests acutely due to the demographic legacy and rapid socioeconomic transformation, compressing generational shifts into a short time frame. When expectations remain anchored in provision while realities demand partnership, mismatches proliferate. Cross cultural pairings offer one avenue for resolution by introducing models where contributions balance across emotional, practical, and financial dimensions. Russian women entering these relationships frequently bring perspectives shaped by different historical experiences, including post Soviet economic transitions that fostered resilience and pragmatism, aligning well with Chinese emphases on diligence and family continuity. Looking ahead, the sustainability of this trend hinges on multiple variables, including continued policy support for international mobility economic conditions that either alleviate or exacerbate domestic pressures and cultural attitudes toward diversity in family formation. If marriage rebounds prove durable, perhaps bolstered by further pro family measures such as expanded childcare subsidies, parental leave enhancements, or housing support for young couples, the urgency driving men toward foreign partners may diminish in some segments. Conversely, persistent stagnation in wages, fertility preferences, or gender trust could accelerate diversification of partnership sources. Demographers project that even with modest increases in unions, the overall pool of young adults continues shrinking, constraining long term recovery. Cross border elements, while supplementary, provide valuable insights into adaptability, demonstrating that human connections can flourish when flexibility supplants rigidity. Individual agency emerges as a decisive force in navigating these changes. Men increasingly prioritize mental well being, personal fulfillment, and equitable relationships over societal checklists, choosing paths that align with authentic compatibility. Women who observe shifting realities may recalibrate toward emphasizing mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and emotional depth, recognizing these as enduring foundations in any cultural context. Families traditionally invested in securing advantageous matches through material means gradually witness evidence that grandchildren and continuity arise from genuine bonds rather than negotiated transactions. Communities benefit from increased diversity, fostering tolerance and innovation in social norms. This evolution underscores a fundamental truth about relationships in modernizing societies. They resist containment within narrow parameters. When one avenue closes, others open, often revealing possibilities previously unimagined. The entry of Russian women into China's marriage ecosystem did not originate the underlying imbalances, but illuminated them by presenting workable alternatives grounded in reciprocity. As more individuals embrace such models, the conversation shifts from competition to coexistence, from scarcity to pluralism. Society stands to gain from a richer tapestry of family forms, each contributing to resilience amid demographic and economic transitions. The ongoing evolution of China's marriage dynamics reveals yet another layer when we consider the profound influence of digital platforms and algorithmic matchmaking in accelerating both the visibility of cross border unions and the polarization of public reactions to them. Short video applications and live streaming services have transformed what was once a largely offline phenomenon confined to physical matchmaking parks into a nationwide spectacle consumed daily by hundreds of millions. Content creators specializing in relationship advice, family vlogs, or cultural comparison channels routinely feature segments on Sino Russian couples, showcasing everything from wedding ceremonies where brides wear blended red and white gowns, symbolizing the fusion of traditions, to everyday routines involving bilingual bedtime stories or joint cooking sessions that mix dumplings with borscht. These videos garner views in the tens of millions likes, in the hundreds of thousands in comment sections that serve as real-time battlegrounds between supporters who celebrate the return of practical partnership values and detractors who frame the trend as a cultural betrayal or demographic threat. The algorithmic promotion of emotionally charged content ensures that the most provocative takes rise to the top, amplifying outrage narratives while simultaneously normalizing the sight of foreign women speaking fluent Mandarin, calling Chinese fathers in law daddy in affectionate terms, and raising visibly happy mixed heritage children. This digital amplification creates a feedback loop that influences real world behavior. Young men watching these clips see tangible proof that marriage remains attainable without the crushing weight of property deeds, six-figure bride prices, and endless luxury demonstrations. The psychological impact proves significant shifting perceptions from resignation to cautious optimism and prompting more to explore international dating applications or attend language exchange meetups in hopes of replicating the outcomes they witness online. For women, the constant stream of such content can feel like an unrelenting mirror reflecting back the consequences of collective choices made over the past 2 decades. When viral posts juxtapose images of local women holding signs advertising advanced degrees, corporate jobs, and high beauty standards next to clips of Russian women cheerfully stating, "No house, no car, no bride price. Just want a good man who loves family," the contrast lands with unmistakable force. Comment threads fill with debates over whether the issue lies in unrealistic expectations, manufactured entitlement, cultural erosion due to Western individualism imported via media, or simply the natural outcome of supply and demand imbalances that no amount of scolding can reverse. Beyond the emotional reactions, the economic logic underpinning these unions deserves closer scrutiny because it operates on principles that differ markedly from the domestic norm, yet prove remarkably resilient under current conditions. In many inland provinces, where average disposable incomes hover between 4,000 and 8,000 yuan monthly after taxes and living expenses, the traditional marriage package would require saving for 15 to 25 years, even with aggressive parental contributions and extreme frugality. Adding the bride price, often equivalent to 3 to 10 years of the groom's entire earnings, pushes the timeline into impossibility for most. Russian women entering these markets typically arrive with their own savings, professional credentials, or the ability to secure remote freelance work in translation education or online content creation, allowing them to cover personal expenses and contribute to joint accounts from day one. This immediate financial parity removes the debt trap that ensnares so many local pairings before they even begin. Couples frequently report reaching homeownership milestones faster than their peers because resources once diverted to ceremonial extravagance or one sided provisioning instead fund down payments, renovations, or investment in small family businesses. The model scales particularly well in Tier 3 and Tier 4 cities where property remains within reach and living costs permit comfortable dual income lifestyles even on moderate salaries. Another underappreciated factor lies in the differing fertility attitudes and timelines that Russian women often bring to these relationships. While many urban Chinese women in their late 20s and 30s express reluctance to have children, citing career interruptions, financial strain, childcare shortages, and the intense pressure of raising high achieving offspring. Under the current education system, their foreign counterparts frequently voice a stronger desire for earlier and larger families, viewing motherhood as a central life purpose rather than a competing priority. This alignment with traditional Chinese family values, particularly among older generations eager for grandchildren, creates powerful incentives for parents in law to embrace the match enthusiastically. Stories abound of Chinese grandparents learning basic Russian phrases, sending care packages to their daughters in law's families abroad, or proudly posting photos of mixed race toddlers speaking their first words in both languages. The emotional payoff for elders who once feared lineage extinction often outweighs any initial cultural unfamiliarity, accelerating family acceptance and integration. Critics sometimes argue that these unions represent a form of demographic arbitrage, where women from economically challenged regions seek stability in a rising power, while Chinese men gain access to partners unavailable domestically due to inflated standards. While elements of opportunity seeking certainly exist on both sides, reducing the phenomenon to pure calculation overlooks the genuine affection, compatibility, and shared life visions reported by countless couples in follow up interviews years after marriage. Longitudinal accounts from pairs married 5 to 10 years show divorce rates comparable to or lower than domestic averages, suggesting durability rooted in realistic expectations rather than romantic illusion. Partners describe weathering economic downturns, health challenges, and cultural misunderstandings through open communication, mutual sacrifice, and a commitment to growth that transcends nationality. These long term successes provide counter evidence to claims of inherent instability and gradually erode resistance among skeptics who initially viewed the trend with suspicion. The trend also intersects with broader shifts in masculinity and femininity ideals circulating in Chinese online spaces. Male centric communities increasingly valorize traits like stoicism, self reliance, emotional restraint, and focus on provision without expectation of reciprocal extravagance, qualities that align well with the appreciation many Russian women express for Chinese men. At the same time, femininity discourses among some younger women emphasize softness, nurturing cooperative attitudes, and rejection of confrontational independence narratives that gained traction during the height of materialist dating culture. Influencers promoting gentle traditional wife archetypes gain followings by arguing that true empowerment includes the freedom to choose partnership roles that feel authentic rather than performative rebellion against outdated patriarchy. This rhetorical pivot reflects a generational course correction, acknowledging that uncompromising individualism, while liberating in theory, often led to isolation in practice. From an institutional perspective, local governments in provinces experiencing acute bachelor surpluses have quietly supported initiatives that facilitate international matchmaking without formally endorsing it as policy. Community centers in some northeastern cities host language classes, cultural festivals, and social mixers explicitly marketed toward Russian speaking visitors or residents, creating low pressure environments where connections form naturally. These efforts receive little national media fanfare, yet produce measurable increases in cross border registrations at local civil affairs offices. The approach allows authorities to address demographic pressures indirectly while avoiding the political sensitivity of appearing to import spouses as a solution to internal mismatches. Meanwhile, national level family planning rhetoric continues emphasizing domestic harmony, encouraging young people to marry earlier and have children sooner, yet implementation remains hampered by economic headwinds that no slogan can fully overcome. As these micro level adaptations accumulate, the aggregate effect begins reshaping societal expectations around what constitutes a successful match. The benchmark for marital viability slowly expands beyond huku, status salary, multiples, property ownership, and cosmetic perfection toward more intangible yet ultimately decisive factors: emotional availability, conflict resolution skills, willingness to share domestic labor, and long term commitment orientation. Couples who embody these qualities, regardless of origin, gain social proof through word of mouth family endorsements and online visibility, creating virtuous cycles that encourage others to prioritize similar attributes. Over time, this diffusion could moderate the extremes of both hypermaterialist courtship and complete withdrawal from the institution, fostering a middle path where relationships rest on balanced contribution rather than unilateral extraction or permanent solitude. The implications for gender relations prove especially far reaching. Women who once wielded disproportionate leverage through scarcity and high standards now operate in an environment where alternatives exist and men exercise greater selectivity. This rebalancing does not erase female agency, but redirects it toward competition on merits that endure beyond youth and economic peaks, qualities like warmth, loyalty, resilience, empathy, and collaborative spirit. Men gain permission to value themselves independently of provisioning capacity, reducing the desperation that once fueled exploitative dating dynamics. Both sides stand to benefit from relationships built on genuine admiration rather than transactional calculus. In the broader historical arc of Chinese society, this moment represents a rare instance where global connectivity and internal contradictions combine to force a reckoning with long entrenched norms. The demographic distortions created by past policies, the consumerist overlay grafted onto traditional provision roles, and the digital platforms that expose every disparity have converged to produce outcomes no central planner could have scripted. Russian women stepping into the frame serve as both symptom and partial remedy, illustrating that when local systems ossify alternatives, emerge from unexpected directions. Whether the trend remains a marginal correction or grows into a transformative force depends on how deeply the lessons penetrate domestic culture over the coming decade. What stands out most clearly in this unfolding chapter is the reminder that human beings adapt when incentives align with fundamental needs for connection, security, and meaning. The current configuration, while disruptive, ultimately points toward greater realism in how relationships form and endure. As more individuals witness functioning alternatives grounded in reciprocity, the path of least resistance may shift from confrontation and withdrawal toward compromise and collaboration. The marriage market does not need to remain a zero sum arena. It can evolve into a space where diverse models coexist, each serving different segments while collectively supporting societal renewal. The digital ecosystem that has propelled these cross border stories into public consciousness also functions as a vast laboratory for testing new relational paradigms in real time. As algorithms prioritize engagement over nuance, the content that spreads fastest tends to highlight extremes, either triumphant testimonials from blended families or heated rants from those who feel culturally displaced. Yet beneath the noise, a quieter but steadily growing body of material documents the ordinary mechanics of these lives, day to day logistics, rather than highlight real moments. Vlogs show couples budgeting together for a modest apartment renovation, one partner handling negotiations with local contractors, while the other manages online orders for household goods unavailable in smaller cities. Others capture mundane routines like grocery shopping, where the foreign wife learns to identify preferred cuts of pork or seasonal vegetables, while the husband practices pronouncing Russian names for future children. These unglamorous slices of life accumulate into a counter narrative that counters accusations of fantasy or opportunism, demonstrating that sustainable unions rely on consistent, small acts of teamwork rather than grand gestures or financial windfalls. This normalization through visibility gradually influences younger cohorts who came of age watching the excesses of the previous generation's dating culture play out online. Men in their early 20s now entering the workforce express far less willingness to participate in the old provisioning rituals, viewing them as outdated traps rather than rites of passage. Surveys conducted by youth oriented research firms in 2025 and 2026 reveal a marked increase in statements like, I would rather stay single than go into debt for someone else's lifestyle, preferences, or a partner who respects my effort matters more than one who demands proof through spending. These attitudes reflect not cynicism, but a learned pragmatism shaped by observing both the burnout of peers who chased high standard matches and the relative calm of those who found contentment through simpler pairings, including international ones. For women in the same age group, the message is more mixed. Some double down on independence, embracing singlehood or child free lifestyles as deliberate choices, while others quietly adjust expectations, lowering the emphasis on material benchmarks and raising the priority given to emotional compatibility, shared values, and willingness to build together. The psychological dimension of this shift cannot be overstated. For many Chinese men, the experience of being repeatedly deemed insufficient based on income, assets, or social status created a form of chronic rejection sensitivity that eroded self worth and fueled defensive withdrawal. Seeing peers form stable families with partners who value their character, diligence, and family orientation provides a powerful corrective experience, restoring a sense of agency and desirability independent of economic performance. Therapists and online counselors specializing in male mental health report increased inquiries from men who credit exposure to Sino-Russian couple content with helping them reframe their value in relationships, moving from provider or nothing mindsets toward more holistic self-concepts that include emotional depth, personal growth, and relational skill. This internal reorientation reduces the desperation that once made exploitative dating dynamics possible and encourages healthier boundary setting across the board. On the female side, the psychological adjustment proves more turbulent because it involves dismantling deeply internalized beliefs about deservedness and entitlement that were reinforced by family media and peer groups over many years. Women who once believed that holding out for maximum provision represented self respect now confront evidence that such strategies can lead to prolonged solitude in a market where leverage has eroded. The resulting cognitive dissonance manifests in varied ways, from defensive anger in comment sections to private introspection shared in anonymous forums, where users admit regret over past choices or seek advice on recalibrating without feeling they are settling. Mental health professionals note a rise in therapy seeking among single women in their 30s who describe feelings of betrayal by the cultural scripts they followed only to find the promised rewards unavailable. The process of unlearning these scripts takes time, yet many report eventual relief upon embracing more flexible definitions of partnership that allow for mutual compromise and shared effort. Generational differences sharpen these dynamics further. Parents who came of age during the reform era often cling to traditional expectations, viewing bride price and property transfer as non negotiable safeguards for daughters in a society that historically offered women limited independent security. Yet, even among this cohort, attitudes soften when they witness grandchildren arriving through foreign daughters in law, or when sons demonstrate greater contentment in marriages free of crushing debt. The oldest generation frequently becomes the strongest advocates once initial skepticism fades, praising the work ethic, warmth, and filial piety displayed by their foreign daughters in law. This shift within families creates intergenerational bridges where younger adults find validation for their choices while elders gain the continuity they feared losing. Internationally, the pattern attracts attention as a case study in how demographic distortions combined with globalization produce unexpected rebalancing mechanisms. Demographers in Europe and North America reference the Chinese experience when analyzing their own declining marriage and fertility rates, noting parallels in delayed family formation, rising singledom, and growing skepticism toward traditional courtship scripts. While no other country matches China's specific gender imbalance or bride price intensity, the broader lesson resonates whenever economic pressures and cultural expectations diverge sharply enough to suppress union formation. Some analysts predict that similar cross border flows could emerge in other high pressure Asian markets if internal mismatches deepen, though geopolitical and cultural barriers often limit scale compared to the relatively frictionless Sino Russian corridor. Within China itself, the trend contributes to a subtle pluralization of acceptable family models. Alongside conventional local marriages and the growing number of Sino foreign unions, other paths gain legitimacy, including long term cohabitation without registration, dink households, intentional singlehood, and even polycentric arrangements where individuals maintain close bonds without formal coupling. This diversification reduces the stigma once attached to remaining unmarried past certain ages and allows society to distribute demographic pressure across multiple outlets rather than concentrating it on a narrowing definition of success. The state cautiously accommodates this pluralism through policies that support child rearing, regardless of marital status, offering subsidies, parental leave, and educational benefits to single mothers or cohabiting couples in some pilot regions. While full legal recognition of diverse family forms remains limited, the practical easing of barriers signals tacit acknowledgement that rigid insistence on traditional marriage as the sole legitimate path no longer serves national interest in a low fertility era. Long term demographic forecasts suggest that even with continued modest rebounds in registrations, the population will continue contracting for decades, creating sustained demand for adaptive strategies. Immigration. while tightly controlled, could play a larger supplementary role if selective policies expand to favor skilled or family oriented entrants, particularly from culturally proximate regions. The Russian speaking population already resident in China, many arriving as students, workers, or spouses, forms a natural bridge facilitating further flows. As second generation mixed children reach adulthood, they will further blur cultural boundaries, normalizing hybrid identities and reducing resistance to international pairings in subsequent generations. The ultimate stabilization of these trends likely hinges on whether domestic gender dynamics achieve a new equilibrium internally or continue requiring external inputs for balance. If younger Chinese women increasingly prioritize reciprocity, emotional attunement, and cooperative domesticity over unilateral provision demands, the market could rebalance organically, drawing more local men back into active pursuit. Early signs appear in rising numbers of urban couples who negotiate equitable chore division, dual career planning, and realistic financial expectations from the outset. Influencers promoting egalitarian yet affectionate models gain traction, suggesting a cultural pivot toward partnership over hierarchy. Should this momentum build, the role of foreign women may remain a valuable niche rather than a dominant counterforce, providing options without overshadowing local possibilities. Conversely, if materialist expectations prove more resilient than anticipated, particularly among upwardly mobile cohorts, the cross border trend could expand further, drawing women from additional regions as awareness grows. Either trajectory represents adaptation rather than collapse, demonstrating the human capacity to recalibrate when old structures no longer fit new realities. The core insight remains consistent. Relationships endure when they deliver mutual value across emotional, practical, and material dimensions and falter when one party consistently extracts more than it contributes. The arrival of Russian women did not invent this principle, it merely made it visible in high relief within a society undergoing rapid transformation. As these patterns solidify, the broader cultural conversation shifts from blame and scarcity toward possibility and pluralism. Men reclaim space to define worth beyond wallets. Women rediscover strength in flexibility and cooperation. Families expand definitions of continuity, and society gains resilience through diverse pathways to connection and renewal. The winter that once seemed permanent for certain expectations gives way to a more varied season where different models coexist, each viable leg in its own context. No single narrative claims monopoly anymore, and that diffusion itself marks progress toward a healthier relational landscape. What do you think about the long term cultural recalibration we have explored here, including generational shifts, psychological adjustments, international parallels, and the pluralization of family models? Do you believe internal adjustments will eventually dominate, or will cross border unions play a larger ongoing role? Share your perspective in the comments. Your thoughts help shape how we understand these evolving realities. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.